All right, well, good afternoon. I'm Brigadier General Tad Clark. It's great to see so many familiar faces, good friends, colleagues, mentors, leaders. And I'm very excited to be with you today and be in the presence of some wonderful gentlemen representing industry, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. This is the Mission Capability Area session, Electromagnetic Warfare. I was brought up in a family, I won't go into the specifics, but my father was lost in Vietnam. He was shot down by an SA-2 in Vietnam, A-6 intruders. So from birth, this is important to me. And then I had the pleasure of being able to fly the F-16 Block 50 on multiple occasions with several friends and colleagues in here, to include Colonel Jesse Ammo Friedel, the Wing Commander Masawa, where we did suppression of enemy air defenses. That was fantastic, but gone are the days of electronic warfare at that time, now electromagnetic warfare. Gone are the days where we know what the threat is, we have a library that addresses it, we hit a series of buttons, and we hope it protects us. We're far beyond that. Great power competition has changed everything. Electromagnetic spectrum operations allows us to protect communications, the transfer of data on data links, conduct JADC2, and advanced battle management system. It helps us kill or close blue kill chains with find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess. And it allows us to deny, disrupt, and defeat red kill chains, communications, and command and control. In the words of General Brown, our chief, yesterday, if you think it's impossible for us to lose our competitive advantage, in this case, in the electromagnetic spectrum, I'm with him. I don't believe in impossible. So we're here with industry. And in the words of our Secretary of Air Force, one team, one fight, and that includes our industry partners. We have to prioritize, articulate with a clear, coherent message of what we need to fight and operate in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's like the oxygen that surrounds us right now. You don't get to choose whether you operate in it or not. You are in it. We have to maneuver. We have to think offensively. It is key to the execution of all of the Air Forces as a service, 5 core missions, and it is just as critical to our Space Force. So from a Department of Air Force, I come to you today and in the presence of wonderful gentlemen here to talk to you about what we're hoping to achieve as a team. Joining us today, I have Dr. Jerry Willetts, the Vice President and General Manager of Electronic Combat Solutions, BAE Systems. I have Dr. Gerald Jerez, Chief Scientist for the Electronic Warfare Division of Leidos. And I have Mr. Anthony Nagara, Vice President, Strategy and Business Development, Space and Airborne Systems, L3Harris Technologies. During the questions, you're going to hear some attributes that we need to pursue. Those are software-defined, reprogrammable, artificial intelligence, machine learning, distributed, platform-agnostic, open architecture, as we drive towards true cognitive electromagnetic warfare. The ROE is, I will allow all 3 gentlemen to introduce themselves, provide an opening remark, and then we have a series of questions that we'd like to navigate that will highlight those attributes I just mentioned. And I have the iPad here, and I'll be looking for questions that have been submitted from the audience. If that applies to you, if you have something that's on your mind, please text the number on the screen. I believe that will be provided to you here in a moment. And with that, I'll stop talking, and we'll get on with the panel. So I'll turn it over to first Dr. Jerry Willetts. Sir.
Thank you, General. And congratulations again on pinning on your star last week and your passion for this critical role for the Air Force. As the General mentioned, I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Electronic Combat Solutions at BAE Systems. We have advanced electronics products that are on 80% of the fixed-wing aircraft in the United States. So a little about myself: married, 3 kids, oldest daughter in college, youngest daughter high school, and then a son in middle school. We have the obligatory cat and dog to boot. So we are a family of sports, playing sports, watching sports, and coaching sports. And our highlight from 2021 is my son's Little League team, for which I help coach. We took 3rd place in the New England Little League tournament. Professionally, aerospace engineer with an electrical engineering control theory background. I've worked a lot of different jobs at a lot of different places, big companies, small companies, government, and academia. Early in my career, there was a company called McDonnell Douglas St. Louis, now called Boeing. In government, a couple of stints at NASA Dryden, Air Force Research Laboratory in Dayton, Ohio, and then served on the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board. 2 startup companies. One was AlphaTech, purchased by BAE Systems in 2005, and have been there ever since. So I've always gravitated towards really hard problems, aerodynamics, structural dynamics, reconfigurable flight controls, autonomy, and now EW. So for me, big picture, why EW? It's freaking hard. And we are in an inflection point here where EW isn't going to be just a survivability kit, but it is an enabler of force projection and engagements. And so that's pretty exciting. Why BAE Systems? I get to work with a pretty amazing team here of people who are focused on full spectrum EW for both defense and attack applications, from the stars to the sea and everything in between. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Nagara. General, thank you so much for having me as part of the panel today. A little bit about my background. I've really been working electronic warfare my entire career. Started with a company called ITT, which migrated to Excelis, ultimately Harris, and now proud to be a part of L3 Harris. Started out as an engineer designing electronic warfare systems, supporting them in the field, which was some of the most rewarding times that I've had. Working with the warfighters and operators through developmental test, operational test, and really saw the transition of the threats that we were facing really as a nation. And to the General's comments, I think we very much are at a pivotal point now where it is challenging to stay ahead of those threats. So L3 Harris, we really bring open architecture, multifunction solutions approach to the electromagnetic spectrum. We're really here to deliver solutions that navigate the spectrum seamlessly, working across communications, radar, electronic warfare, to really provide that spectrum dominance that our warfighters need. So I'm really thankful to be here today and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerez. Spent 25 years on active duty in the Air Force, including a tour as a professor at the Air Force Institute of Technology, teaching graduate courses and doing research in electronic warfare, radar, and signal processing. And then I spent the last 25 years at Leidos, previously called SAIC, developing advanced electronic attack techniques, electronic protection algorithms, and very high fidelity models and simulations for programs for all the various research organizations such as DARPA, ONR, AFRL, et cetera. At Leidos, the EW division and the broader enterprise our main objective is to rapidly deliver hardware agnostic EA capabilities into the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and now we're working on Marine Corps stuff. As an example, we took DARPA technology that we developed called the Advanced Radar Countermeasure Technology, and we're currently the prime system integrator for software upgrade on the ALQ-214 that's going on the FA-18 Super Hornet. Our work typically involves everything from developing very high fidelity IQ level, sample level simulations, as well as engagement level simulations, projecting the adversary threats out to 2030 and 2035, and then developing EA techniques and technology, EP algorithms and waveforms, ES algorithms, and then developing the hardware that's advanced processors that produce up to 60-some, up to teraops of processing power on small systems on a chip or multi-chip modules, and then developing the real-time firmware and software to run on them. So with that, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for those opening remarks. Time is limited, so let's launch into a series of questions. I'm going to direct the first question to Dr. Willetts from BAE Systems. The question is, how can machine learning be effectively applied to electromagnetic warfare, and when is physics-based artificial intelligence more appropriate?
Great, thank you, General. So great question. Certainly, artificial intelligence, machine learning, as I will refer to as AI/ML, is all the rage. It certainly has solved some interesting defense problems over the last several decades, but it really excels in compact representations of large data sets and identifying patterns of life within that data set. So very natural to take that leap to apply that to the EW problem that was articulated, where we have millions of pulses intersecting an aircraft as you fly into the area of responsibility, AOR, and you have to detect, identify, discern intent to those pulses that are changing frequency, scan, waveform continuously. And based upon that intent, neutralize it if it poses a threat to your aircraft or your buddy's aircraft, right? That's the problem. So very natural to try to take that large-scale representation and apply it, but there are some challenges that we have to address and recognize with AI/ML. First, there is no theoretical foundation to support performance or safety. And simply put, right, until that theory is developed, if ever, you should not apply it to flight controls, nuclear reaction control, or any flight critical software. Second, our adversaries are trying to conceal their actions, right, which means we will not have the training set available prior to mission. Now, some people say, no worries, we're going to detect, we'll just retrain in the air. But without the theoretical foundation to support that, you don't know what the unintended consequences are, and you just can't simply pull over to the side of the road, reprocess and regression test to make sure you didn't break something, and say, please don't shoot. So with that, what we're basically suggesting is that there's a middle ground based upon what we currently have that can use the benefits of it, but also address the limitations. And what we're advocating is that, on the DARPA ARC program as well, we learned a lot. And fundamentally, the radar range equation dictates everything that their adversaries can do. And apply the AI machine learning to the fundamental parameters of the radar range equation and embed that in a multi-rate feedback control system like we have for modern flight controls today. That's what we're advocating. So how does that work? As your aircraft is flying into the AOR, 8 nautical miles a minute, being hit by literally millions of pulses that are constantly changing, right, all the time, your innermost feedback loop, which we call rapid response, is going to process, right, discern intent, and if need be, neutralize that pulse, right, at faster speeds than we could ever imagine possible. In parallel to that, the AI/ML, using the radar range equation as a framework, is going to start processing every single pulse and pulling out the patterns in that large data representation. Based upon that, you will then feed that to support your EW resource allocation, where you scan, how you dwell. You also use that for threat identification and intent, but you're not going to do that from a table lookup like we do today. You're going to look at just fundamental characteristics. Is that pulse, right, searching? Is that pulse tracking? Is that pulse firing? Is that pulse firing on me, right? It's a different way of looking at EW. You're also going to use this data to start looking at the overall assessment of the IADS, the Integrated Air Defense System, and ideally sharing that with your buddy or a force ship elsewhere in the battle space. And then we recommend you should be offboarding this as soon as you can. If you can do it in flight, great. If not, as soon as you get to the ground, that data has to be offboard to support theater-wide battle management. So what we're advocating in what we call a physics-based cognitive EW, right, it's an outgrowth of what we did under the DARPA ARC program, really basically is looking at the benefits of all the intelligence data you have, right, does the learning, right, shares that learning in real time, but allows you to do that in an essence where EW is still providing your survivability and supporting force projection and engagement. We think it's pretty exciting, and we think that there's opportunities on programs right around the corner to actually field this on tactically relevant aircraft and have a go-to-war capability in a couple of years from now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Willetts. All right, I'm going to direct the next question to Mr. Anthony Nagara. The question is, distributed electromagnetic warfare will be key to effectively gaining and maintaining electromagnetic spectrum superiority in a near-peer fight. What challenges do you see to effectively employing distributed electromagnetic warfare, and where do we need to be investing more to achieve this capability?
Thank you, sir. Great question. First of all, let me talk a little bit about what we mean by distributed electronic warfare. Distributed EW really talks about a heterogeneous mix of platforms that are in the environment. They may have different mixes of capabilities, large, small platforms that can operate within the spectrum, and those need to be managed appropriately. Each individual platform, if left to make its own decisions, may sub-optimize for operation within the spectrum. So one of the largest challenges, and I think the areas in which we need to look at for research as well as programmatic excellence, is in the area of distributed command and control. When we look at these heterogeneous platforms operating in theater, we need to have that layer of C2 which talks about how do we effectively look throughout the spectrum and employ these distributed assets to have an overall tactical or strategic effect within the spectrum. So electromagnetic command and control is just an important layer within the overall JADC2 architecture that we're building out really as a nation. The visualization capabilities within the spectrum that we need to provide to our commanders and the warfighters who need to make these decisions in real time is going to be critically important. And ultimately, how do we direct the right effects across these distributed assets is all going to reside in this EMC2. And I think that is probably one of the most fundamental capabilities that we should be developing here in the near future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Nagara. I'll direct the third question to Dr. Jerez. The question is, how do you suggest the Air Force pursue its goal of a modular, open system architecture for electromagnetic warfare?
Yes, as you know, building open systems or adapting current systems to be open is very difficult. If you ever try to fix something at home, like a toilet, it takes 3 trips to Home Depot to find the right part because everybody's got different interfaces, different approaches, different designs. But new systems, like if you think about the internet or your cell phone, which are very open, it's easier to do. Any of you can get on an airplane with just about any device and any client sitting on that device to manage your email or whatever, and you're able to access the internet and manage the information in the way that you want. It's extremely open. The cell phone provides services to those apps, and those apps then take advantage of it. When I'm on the road, my bank app tells me that I'm on the road, and do I need to put out an alert that, where I'm at so that they don't catch somebody else using my credit card? Okay, same thing for EW. You need to begin thinking about the electromagnetic spectrum as a service, providing a service down to the platforms. It can just like your phone that provides position, your geolocation provides information of various types. You have to do the same thing. And so the technology exists today to be able to do that on new platforms. It's especially able to do this on new platforms, mostly unmanned vehicles, whether they're under the sea or on the surface, on the ground, or in the air or in space. And the reason is that because the technology exists to do direct RF sampling of the signals, and we have the processing capability to process huge amounts of data, and we can agilely move across the spectrum at will and change the bandwidth at will. So the technology exists. It allows you to make it reprogrammable and robust against obsolescence. So I think those are the key factors. Again, thinking of the spectrum as a service, designing an architecture that provides that spectrum, and then establishing standard interfaces such as the mission definition file, description file. They're all defined differently by every provider. And so when you're writing software to an EW system or an upgrade, you have to adjust to that. The same thing with the runtime software layer. Think of it as an operating system for real-time software. It all is very specific to the underlying processors. You have to build that runtime software layer so that people that are writing the apps to it, just like they do on your cell phone, don't have to customize it to each system.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jerez. So far, you've heard us talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, open architecture. Just most recently, obviously, with what Dr. Jerez talked about. So far, we're highlighting some of these attributes. We've got a couple more questions to go through that highlight some more attributes, and there's some great questions that are coming in on the iPad here as well, so we'll get to those in just a moment. So I'd like to direct the next question to Dr. Willetts. The question is, What can industry do to help the government with electromagnetic warfare system reprogramming?
All right, thank you. That's a great topic. I certainly have been doing a lot of thinking in this area, so we're going to do a little audience participation at this time. So please raise your hand and keep them raised if you were trained as an electrical engineer. Get them high. All right, keep your hand raised if you were also trained to reprogram at the machine level, including firmware. All right. I'm going to come back to that, but take a look at how few hands are up in this audience. It is a fraction of the percentage of highly specialized electrical engineers that have the skill set to program an EW system today. There are hundreds of variables that need to be programmed at the firmware level at the memory stack of highly specialized processors. That's the state of EW today. Now, to compound this, for all you people in the flight suits, if you go to the squadron, right, weapon system to weapon system, there is no consistent manner for updating your EW parameters. And in fact, some weapon systems are so far behind that it is a maintenance action by a maintenance computer, similar to updating your flight control laws, intentionally designed not to be updated. So we certainly embrace open system standards and the cognitive EW vision that we just laid out, but it doesn't solve the problem of rapid reprogramming until we address two fundamental issues. First, we got to get the infrastructure fixed. Right? Our belief is that every pilot that is mission planning in front of their jumps terminal or whatever it comes in the future, but it's jumps today, should be able to update their EW system before they go and crawl into that cockpit. They should do their mission planning at their squadron, go plug it in just like any other system. And oh, by the way, when they crawl out of that cockpit and all that data they collected and learned, they should be able to bring that right back to the squadron, plug it into their cartridge terminal, and download it into jumps and share that information everywhere. And ideally, we've got networks that are doing this. The second issue that we have to address is the operator-machine interface. So the tools we have for reprogramming are for those highly specialized electrical engineers. They are for the designing and debugging of them, because we've never invested and we rush those to the field and no one can really use them except for those highly specialized engineers. So imagine that we asked pilots to crawl into the cockpit and we just didn't do the 100 years of investment with pilot cockpit integration and said, pilots, you need to individually control every single control surface, every parameter of your engine, every parameter of your radar, and so on. And oh, by the way, go kick ass, right? It's really hard. So what we're advocating is time for us to bring the cognitive engineers that specialize in displays, right? Electrical engineers don't do good displays, just like flight control people don't do good displays in cockpits. It's a different discipline. It's time to bring them to this community. So we believe that if you bring this together, you can enable that, rapid reprogramming at the squadron by the squadron, share information in flight, and then send it all the way back to the battle management. And we think the 350th Spectrum Warfare Wing, right, it's a great step. We're excited about the opportunity to go do this. I think that there's many opportunities. And back to those people who had their hands raised, we're hiring, so come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
I don't want to thank you for that. We need them in the Air Force. No, seriously, this is, again, one team, one fight. So when we are steeped in a career field and then we look to how to continue contributing to our nation, it's fantastic to see so many veterans in our industry. So thank you for that. All right, next question for Mr. Anthony Nagara. Software-defined electromagnetic warfare will allow us to achieve agility within the electromagnetic spectrum. What challenges do you foresee to implementing this vision?
Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, I think we all understand the benefits of software-defined electronic warfare. You're getting capability out faster to the warfighter that needs it. The other piece of this puzzle, though, which is extremely important, is how do we create an ecosystem where we can allow best-of-breed vendors, partners, think tanks to bring those capabilities forward at the time of need? Again, the fact that what we don't want to have happen is there are advanced capabilities that are locked out of being deployed on existing systems. So the move to software-defined can, again, create this rich ecosystem for us to draw from to stay ahead of our adversaries. So if you think about what enables some of the capabilities today in one of our largest software-defined ecosystems, it was mentioned before, the internet and the web. If you look at the users of the internet, all of us, as well as the developers, there is very little barrier to entry to allow them to create applications, extremely rich environments, with very little knowledge of the APIs, the application programming interfaces, and the standards that it was built on. The users get to use the applications that they need. The developers develop them at the time of need. So one of our key tenets, and this goes across government and industry, is we need to create a standards organization around these APIs, these interfaces, so that really any small business up to larger primes and OEMs can develop those best-of-breed capabilities and plug them in at the time of need. So that is absolutely the first thing we need to figure out, is just how do we enable this rich software-defined ecosystem through standardized interfaces and bringing those forward so that all partners can contribute to the fight, and that it's not just locked into a specific platform with a specific vendor. So I think that will enable us to leap ahead of our threats and adversaries.
Great, thank you. Dr. Grace, the next question is related to speed. The question is thinking through the lens of speed, how do we ensure our electromagnetic warfare systems provide our warfighters every possible advantage in relevant timescales?
Yeah. Well, you have to, we keep referring to the internet and cell phones. You have to be able to develop this on commercial timescales. What iPhone are they up to now? I'm not an iPhone user, but every year or two is a new iPhone that comes out. How many years does it take to get an EW system out? I've worked on systems for 10 years that don't get fielded. So we have to be able to work on those commercial timescales, because some people say he who invented last wins in the EW world. And so the adversary has many more resources than we do. China puts out 10 times the double E's every year that the United States does. Even if maybe their universities aren't as good, they still have much more people working on these problems. They don't have quite the complicated bureaucracies that we do, so they can turn their things around faster. So in order to do that, you've heard it kind of a few times here, you have to develop an architecture and a system so that people developing the apps don't need to know all those details the gentleman next to me just spoke to.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're getting some great inputs from the audience. I'm going to read this question. I'm going to give you just a moment to think on it, and then I'll share a couple thoughts, and then we'll go in reverse order, Dr. Jerez, and then towards me. The question is what can we do to shift our mindset from an electromagnetic warfare versus cyber mentality to a unified electromagnetic warfare and cyber and RF-enabled cyber approach? So that's the question. What can we do to shift our mindset from EW versus cyber to a combined EW cyber perspective? As you think on that just for a moment, another question I received was most likely from someone that's an F-16 driver in the audience, and it was talking about, well, is the wild weasel mission as we know it today dead? And as you've watched through the years, and that's changed from flying a seed cap or flow-through tactics, I wouldn't say it's dead. I simply think that we need to continue to think about how we change and update to ensure our tactics, techniques, and procedures are relevant with the systems that we have. And what I see is more aircraft, platform agnostic, but more aircraft participating in that constellation, that ecosystem of EW types of capabilities, feeding information via data links, and making sure that everyone has a sense of what is in the environment, characterizing the environment, and then developing ways to address that threat, if it is a threat, or redirect mission packages in different directions to avoid the threat if and when able. So again, I don't see it being dead. I simply see it as we need to look at it through the lens of updating our TTPs as we continue to increase our technological capabilities in the contested environment. So with that, I'm going to now go back to Dr. Grace, and I'll let you address that question. Again, that question was, how can we shift our mindset from EW versus cyber to a combined EW cyber approach?
Yeah, there's ongoing work in that area. I can't say much about it, but the first thing to realize is cyber, when you're going against, for example, a radar, is very different than the cyber you might think of as going against your computer. Okay, you still have to work in sort of the electromagnetic environment. You have to come in through the front of an antenna, for example. It has to go through the A to D converters. It's got to get processed by whatever algorithms are on there. So you're really coming in a similar fashion than you are when you're doing, say, typical jamming or electronic attack. So it's very natural to sort of unify it. You just have to develop now the techniques that are going against, if you will, the mistakes that the person that developed that system made when he programmed it or architected it. So I think I'll leave it at that. Also, if I could come back on that first question, because I did forget something really important. In terms of speeding things up, it's really important that we use the best practices of each service across all the services, so we're not trying to reinvent things. For example, the work we're doing on the FA-18 for ALQ 214, we're looking at that for high-valued assets. Not that fighters aren't high-valued assets, but I'm thinking more of tankers and AWACS and JSTARS and other systems. So using what's developed for one service or the standards that somebody talked about that are developed for one service, and the interfaces, just use those across all the services. And then the last thing, as you all know that work in this realm, security is a constantly challenge. And one thing you could do is knock down, not the security barriers, because we need those to protect it, but the barriers between us. So when, if you have a special access caveat in the Air Force and they're doing the same exact thing in the Navy or the Army, why can't it be a common caveat with a common security set of instructions? So I hope I answered both questions.
Great. Thank you, sir. Mr. Nagara?
Sure, yeah, I'd definitely like to build on the comments. I think to really shift our mindset, we have to think that they truly are one and the same along a continuum. It's really just about timescales. When we talk about electronic warfare and electronic attack, really those effects are transient in a way. When we are actively jamming or responding to the electromagnetic environment, those effects go away, if you will, and when we stop the effect. But cyber, it may have a latent capability. It is, as was mentioned before, utilizing the same processing chain, within our blue capabilities as well as the threat side. So it's really, we should be having this conversation as a merged capability along the same timescale continuum.
Great, thank you. Dr. Willetts?
Yeah, so pretty complicated topic for this venue. So let me start to unpack this. So there's a cyber resiliency aspect to this, and we call it cyber warning receiver. So we will do scans of our products for the best information, but at the end of the day, once it leaves the factory or the depot, right, the threat's changed. So cyber warning receivers, which are real-time alarm systems, have already been fielded on some of our products. And so the basic notion here is like your alarm at your house. Intruder's in there. It's in the kitchen. Lock all the doors to the kitchen. Now get the intruder out of your kitchen and restore the health. On the defensive and attack side, we're already there as a company. It's just another technique. And we don't delineate between the two, right? I understand the policy does, but from our products and our company perspective, if we're doing defensive cyber or offensive cyber, it's just another technique, right, that gets programmed into our systems. And it varies from system to system on its ability to employ it and how that happens. But to us, it's already there.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right, we're getting short on time, but I think we can find time for one more question and allow all three of you gentlemen to address it. I would ask you to limit your response to about a minute, if you could, please. The question is with emphasis of modeling and simulation, what are your thoughts on the challenges and or considerations with respect to creating realistic models for electromagnetic warfare capabilities? Dr. Willetts, would you mind, or actually, I started off with you, Dr. Grace. Would you mind starting us off?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Look, there's a lot of discussion around operational analysis and modeling and simulation. It's absolutely critical. I think, some of the tools that we use today to do really campaign level modeling and simulation, they tend to abstract away some of the nuances and details that are extremely important when it comes to electromagnetic operations and spectrum warfare. So it's very important that we connect sort of the engineering level tools that we use to model the actual effects of techniques on a radar or how we process any incoming signals within the spectrum. Those need to really be connected all the way up through the levels of modeling and simulation so that we can guarantee that when we deploy these solutions, they will ultimately increase the warfighter effectiveness and survivability. So I think we have to understand the different levels of modeling and simulation and make sure that connection goes all the way down to the lowest possible level so that we can look at those effective measures.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nagara. And I'm going to go over here to Dr. Willetts. Sir, would you mind addressing that question?
Yeah, so Anthony just talked about the constructive and virtual models, right, and the tools. So there is a tremendous amount of models already in the industry. Whether or not we will ever get a digital twin goes back to, do we have the compute power? I mean, these are high-end models just for an antenna alone, let alone a full instant, right? The models are there. We just don't know how to connect them and have that digital twin of what it would look like installed in an aircraft. And fundamentally, if you have an EW system and hold it in your hands, until you install in the aircraft, you really don't know what the installed performance is, and that aircraft and the rest of the aircraft and the rest of the systems make a world of difference for our business.
Great. Thank you. And Dr. Jerez.
Yeah, having worked with BAE and L3 on a number of projects, I know they have their models and their architectures, and we have ours. We talked about open system architectures, and we really need that in the modeling and simulation environment, so that as people develop models, digital twins of this thing or that thing, and they get it, verified and accepted, then others should be able to take advantage of that. And I think one way to get there is to have some kind of a sort of plug-and-play capability with the right architecture.
Great. Thank you, sir. Well, for a community, all of us in this room, that pride ourselves on time on target, we're going to go ahead and bring that to an end, this session to an end. I am excited about a couple things. The fact that the United States Air Force stood up the directorate that I'm in charge of 2 years ago, the fact that they stood up a wing, the 350th Spectrum Warfare Wing, under the leadership of Colonel William Dollar Young on the 25th of June, the fact that there is a panel today to talk about electromagnetic warfare. These are all signs and indications and warnings, hopefully to our adversary, that we take this seriously, but internally to all of us, that we're putting more attention on something that we unfortunately neglected in the mid-90s. And as we put our time and attention and resources and technical expertise and professionals to the test to expand our capabilities, I contend, I argue, and I know I am joined by these three gentlemen and all of our industry partners, I contend that this is critical. It is critical. And it will help us get the competitive advantage and maintain the competitive advantage when we're able to operate in contested environments effectively with lethality and resilience and speed and agility. So I do want to thank Dr. Jerry Willetts, again from BAA Systems, Dr. Gerald Jerez at the end with Leidos, and Mr. Anthony Nagara from L3 Harris Technologies in the middle. I want to thank you three gentlemen for your time as we prepared for today, your time in this session. I also want to thank all of our industry partners that have a part to play in making sure that we win. And that's what General Brown talks about all the time. We need to accelerate change or lose. I don't like the word lose, and I know he used that word deliberately. We want to win. And if we're going to win, this is one of the things we need to take seriously. And I appreciate everybody's role in this. And I would ask that we all become zealots of the electromagnetic spectrum, not just those that have an AFSC or career field that designates them a part of this cadre. We are all in this together, and we're all in this together as DoD and industry. So thank you so much for your time. And with that, we will break. You're cleared and hot to go out to the exhibit hall, and then we'll reconvene a little bit later, I believe at 3:40 is when we'll reconvene with the next session. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, gentlemen.